hello to everybody. I'm, of course, obviously very excited and honored to be here today as a new head coach of England.
He's just been appointed as a new English head coach, and with this comes a lot of expectations too. Tuchel has already set out to achieve what no one else since Alf Ramsey in 1996. He's just promised to try to make England world champions again. The big question is, just how good is the guy trying to make this possible? And could he be the guy who actually brings football home? Thomas Tuchel is one of the most tactically gifted coaches of his generation. It takes a lot to be getting praise from the likes of Pep Guardiola.
I have a lot of respect from Thomas. Has been in Mainz, in Dortmund, in PSG, now here, in every place always has done really well, and the team's always is a joy to watch.
He's even managed to get the better of Pep on multiple occasions as well. Coming down to the man though, Tuchel is a guy who would stop at nothing to make sure his team wins, and that means trying out every possible tactic available. Tuchel is also to a very large extent successful. He's won trophies while coaching in 3 of the biggest leagues in European football: the DFB Pokal with Borussia Dortmund, the Champions League, the UEFA Super Cup and Club World Cup with Chelsea, the French Liga, and basically everything in France, and the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich. Thomas Tuchel knows how to win, and that's also because he knows how to get the best out of a group. Take it back to Chelsea's 2021 Champions League run, and they basically came from nowhere to win the entire thing. Tuchel took charge of the team in January 2021, just in time for the knockout phase, and from that point on, he transformed an inconsistent Chelsea team under Frank Lampard into one of the most rigid teams on the continent. They legit beat Real Madrid home and away and Manchester City in the final without conceding. When you dig this, it's wild. The man will stop at nothing to win. He'd look anyone in the eye if he had to. I quite literally mean that. But seriously though, now he's taken up the England job as manager, there were a lot of mixed reactions to the news, and this is down to multiple factors as well. And the first one is trying to understand if the man's tactics actually fit the idea the national team has. Thomas Tuchel could be a mix of both worlds. Using data from his time at Chelsea to begin with, in 55 of the 63 league games he took control of the team, he had them playing in a 3-4-2-1 formation. 3 centre-backs, 2 holding midfielders, 2 wing-backs, 2 number 10s and a centre-forward. This doesn't mean it's his go-to formation. After leaving Chelsea, he only used this tactic once in his 43 league games in charge of Bayern Munich. So what's the deal with the guy? Well, Tuchel's tactics will depend largely on what he has available to work with. At Chelsea, for example, he used a back 3 because he wanted a defensive unit that could complement each other. Thiago Silva lacked the pace to compete with modern-day attackers. But in the back 3, alongside Antonio Rudiger and Cesar Azpilicueta, the compactness and rigid structure allowed them to succeed. At Bayern Munich, because he had more resources available to him, Tuchel reverted to a back 4, and his idea was to push up with centre-backs who had the pace to cover him behind. So again, the tactics are based on what he's got available to him, and we'll see later on this is a good thing. Tuchel isn't tied down to a particular formation, and that means anyone watching England under him could expect a variety of tactical setups all through. But one thing we can expect is that he'll set up his team to be as stingy as possible. By this, I mean they won't give much away. We saw it at Dortmund, at PSG, at Chelsea in detail, and even at Bayern Munich. Tuchel prefers safety and caution over attacking football. Once they've got the lead, it's about containing the opposition rather than trying to add to it. Going forward though, it could be a mix of creativity and expansion.
And it's very important that we don't suppress creativity. The opposite. But in your room, in your space, in that moment where you are protected, please find your solution. I will never tell Neymar what to do in a certain closed space because he will find a solution I never dream about.
Like we just heard in the conversation here, Tuchel won't limit the creativity of the attacking players. He just wants them to be able to do it in the specific areas of the pitch. If you're a guy like Phil Foden or Jack Grealish, it could be exciting times ahead. The use of number 10s or very creative players has been a key part of Tuchel's teams over the years, and England is blessed with an abundance of that type of talent. Will he do the same with the national team? Well, to be honest, the problem with England under Gareth Southgate wasn't that they weren't compact enough. If anything, they had some of the best defensive displays, with clean sheets and solid performances. They just couldn't get it over the line when they needed to. And apparently the FA believes Thomas Tuchel is a man who can. If there's another thing we do know about Thomas Tuchel though, It's that we shouldn't be expecting to see a lot of youngsters or inexperienced names in the English squad anytime soon. He had a public fallout with the Bayern board because the CEO accused him of not integrating youngsters into the team and training youth team players. Tuchel prefers experience, using names and players he knows are familiar with the system, and ultimately, players he knows he can trust. Once he has that, the tactics might change, but the personnel rarely will. Once a new coach arrives, you kind of think about how he can get the best out of both the team and individuals. And to this end, with Thomas Tuchel, it's a mixed bag. As we've touched on already, Tuchel is very good at creating units, teams that follow instructions down to the letter and organise patterns of play. However, when it comes to getting the best out of individual players, his track record is limited. The standout examples will be the likes of Harry Kane. The English captain had his best season from a numbers perspective under Tuchel last campaign, which ultimately ended with him winning the European Golden Shoe Award. Names like Thiago Silva and Jorginho come to mind. But after this, there isn't that much in terms of players who have succeeded individually under him. Tuchel prefers the system to work, and in turn, this means that certain players will have to sacrifice that extra bit of creativity just to get the team to perform. Can Tuchel succeed with this method at the national team level? Well, that's another different ballgame entirely. It's almost as if he does his best work when his resources are limited. Take for instance the stints at Bayern Munich and PSG. Now, some might disagree, but given the caliber of players they had and the expectations of the team, it didn't quite work out. At PSG, the ultimate aim was to take the team to win a first Champions League title. He got to the final, but ultimately couldn't pull it off, and was sacked because of reasons you'll find out later on, which might come back to affect his position as head coach of the English national team. But first, you know the drill. If you haven't subscribed to Football Historia by now, click that button staring at you down below. So at Bayern Munich, Tuchel had a similar task. A proper team that was expected to go far in the Champions League. And in the two campaigns he had as Bayern's head coach in the competition, they got knocked out in the quarter-finals and semi-finals respectively. However, at Chelsea, with limited resources, he managed to pull off a Champions League title and 2 more trophies as well. At Borussia Dortmund, despite Bayern's dominance in the competition, he won the DFB Pokal in 2017. In total, Tuchel's record of 11 career trophies as a manager says something. The man knows how to win, and that's why the FA has brought him in. See, once the news was in, the length of Tuchel's contract immediately showed what the FIA was after regarding Tuchel. Tuchel's contract is to last for 18 months, starting on the 1st of January 2025 and ending just after the 2026 World Cup. The FA has gone out and decided to go for results this time out. It seems Tuchel does his best work when he needs to fix a problem, rather than when he has to build from scratch. Still, we have to go back to his Chelsea days, and he came into a team that was struggling for form in mid-table and helped them finish 4th. This is an England team that has gotten close to the brink of greatness a few times but hasn't been able to completely pull through, and ultimately, Tuchel might be the man who changes this. At Bayern Munich, it was the same thing. When he came in halfway through the 2022-23 season, he managed to secure the Bundesliga that season on the final day, in what looked like a league title that was heading to Borussia Dortmund. Whereas when you look at when Tuchel had to build a team from the start of a complete season, it wasn't quite the same amount of success replicated. Now, there is a worrying trend with Tuchel that also feels like the FA forgot their checklist. In all his last 4 gigs, Tuchel has had positive starts, but ended up badly. At Borussia Dortmund, his relationship with the board fell off after he accused the upper staff of not adequately supporting the team when they got road-bombed in the quarter-final clash versus Monaco in 2017. At PSG, he fell out with sporting director Leonardo, and despite winning 2 league titles and taking PSG to a first Champions League final, Tuchel was sacked. At Chelsea, once the takeover was complete, Tuchel complained about the board's interference in first-team affairs by signing players he didn't exactly need. And once he couldn't get the best out of the new signings as they wanted, Tuchel was sacked. Bayern Munich, another public fallout, and in this one, they'd already announced that Tuchel wasn't going to continue with the team before the end of the season. Having this many fallouts consecutively is a worrying trend, and it really shouldn't surprise anyone if it happens again. To the locals, the news of Thomas Tuchel is a mixed bag.
Probably got the best available coach in Europe and the world at this moment in time, so I think fitting that criteria, absolutely. They're spot on. I'm not sure it fits the criteria of St George's Park and the belief in English coaches and the actual growth in I suppose, the English team's performance in this last 7 or 8 years.
Gary Neville is one of many examples so far who don't exactly agree with the appointment of Tuchel. And to be fair, they have a point. With Gareth Southgate, you could see the long-term plan with the national team. They'd been knocking on the door of international success, and between 2018 and 2024, they'd been back-to-back Euro finals, as well as a fourth-place finish at the 2018 World Cup and a quarter-final exit at the 2022 World Cup. The team has also featured a mix of young talent who developed into first-team regulars, while preparing the next group as well. The point is, everything followed an organised pattern. But with Thomas Tuchel, you tend to worry that it won't be the same. He's only got 18 months to prove himself. Long term, it doesn't feel like there's a plan for that. Seems like the FA is only concerned about the result now. And that's why they've gone for a result-orientated coach whose main task is to win. They don't exactly care how. History is not on his side either. By accepting the role, Tuchel becomes only the third foreign coach in the history of the national team. The other two, Sven-Göran Eriksson and Fabio Capello, also failed to win any major trophies in their stints as England manager. And Tuchel is now hoping to become the first foreign manager to break the jinx. Initially, the reports suggested that he'd be going to Manchester United, but instead Tuchel decided to take up the biggest job in international football, managing an England team looking for a first major trophy since 1966. Who knows? Tuchel might just be the bright spark they need. Looking at the female team, the Lionesses, the appointment of Sarina Wiegman, a Dutch international, as head coach of the Lionesses, transformed the fortunes of the women's team. They won the Euros in 2022 under foreign management, and from that point on, the female team has been actively building on that success. Ultimately, it comes down to what he was hired for in the first place. See guys, the truth is, Thomas Tuchel is smart enough to understand the job he's in there to do. He's not there to play fancy football and gain a lot of fans and supporters with his style of play. He's there to win. And that's why in his first press conference, Tuchel made it clear what the plan is: to add another star to the national team's crest to win the World Cup. This, in turn, means that Tuchel knows that while how the team's set up might be intriguing to the fans, it's again based on the results, and so long as they're winning, even if he plays a less attractive and expansive brand of football, he'll be judged based on the results. This is his first job as a head coach of a national team, but even with that, the expectations he's got going on are huge. Still, I wouldn't write him off. In fact, you shouldn't. If Tuchel can pull this off with England and somehow make a team that always underperforms become champions of the world in that short span of 18 months, he'll have turned himself into an English legend. Still wondering why Tuchel didn't want to wait to take up the Manchester United job later in the summer, like he was getting prepared for? And maybe that's because Tuchel, like the rest of the world, realised the truth about United, that they're a scary joke. Click the next video to find out how and why.